بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وبارك على الأشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن سلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد حياكم الله جميعا وبارك الله فيكم. Apologies for the late start of our lesson today. Inshallah ta'ala, the intent is to discuss the beginning of Kitab al-Hajj, the chapter pertaining to Hajj. As we discussed before, on last lesson, and we explained the last lesson, the reason why we're going directly from Kitab al-Zakat to Kitab al-Hajj is due to the fact that previously we've already covered Kitab al-Siyam in the lead up to Ramadan over last year. And so we'll go directly to Kitab al-Hajj, and then when Ramadan approaches again, inshallah, then we'll find something that's munasib, something which is befitting and suitable to go through as well, if Allah Ta'ala permits, pertaining to the ahkam of Ramadan and Siyam. And so here we have the chapter pertaining to Hajj. And sometimes it mentions Kitab al-Hajj wa Umrah. So the chapter pertains to Hajj and Umrah, both of them together. And so Ibn Qudāmah, raḥimahullāh, he mentions يجب الحج والعمرة مرة في عمر على مسلم عاقل بالغ حر إذا استطاع إليه سبيلا. And so he mentions, and he begins by the mentioning of the obligation of Hajj and Umrah. That Hajj and Umrah is an obligation upon every individual once within their life. Upon every Muslim, aqil, a sound mind, baligh, an individual that has reached puberty, hur, he's a free individual, he's emancipated, and he has the ability, istata'a ilayhi sabīla. He has the ability to perform it. So before anything else, the first thing, like most, when we go through a new topic, we wish to begin with its ta'rif, with definition. And so the definition of Hajj, linguistically, lughatan, is al-qasd, an intent to do something. Whilst the definition of Hajj, shar'an, in the Sharia, is al-qasd, قصد بيت الله الحرام لأجل أداء المناسك. So it's the intent to go to the Baytullah al-Haram. It's the intent to go to the Baytullah al-Haram in order to perform the manasik, and perform the rites, the rituals of Hajj. And Hajj itself, in terms of its hukum, is it's an obligation. The ruling of Hajj is it's an obligation, and it was made an obligation in the 9th year of the Hijrah after Fath Makkah. However, the Prophet ﷺ did not perform the Hajj in that same year. Due to the fact that they were still mushrikeen at the time. And so the intent was to cleanse the land of the mushrikeen. And in relation to Umrah, Umrah, in terms of its linguistic meaning, is a ziyarah. A ziyarah, to make a visit. Whilst the Shar'an, the definition in terms of the Sharia of Umrah, is الزيارة نعم الزيارة زيارة الحرام على هيئة مخصوصة ولغرض مخصوص. And so Umrah linguistically is the visit to the Bayt al-Masjid al-Haram, the Bayt al-Haram, in a manner which is specified and for a specified intent. This is the Umrah. And as is mentioned, it is an obligation. Naam, it's an obligation. The Umrah itself is an obligation. Thereafter, he mentions in the obligation of the or the conditions rather of the Hajj. Conditions in order for a person to perform Hajj. And you can say that the conditions are of different types. And the first of the condition, the first type of condition is a shart li wujub wa sihha. So the first type of condition is a condition referring to, in order for it to be an obligation, and in order for it to be accepted, yani the correct action. So your first one is the wujub wa sihha. And the second is the condition in order for it to be يعني وجوب والإجازة. Or وجوب والإجزاء. So the second type of condition is the condition for the obligation as well as it being rewarded. And then the third is the condition upon its obligation alone. Now, so these are the three types. So the first of the three being what, ikhwah?
It's obligation for it to be accepted.
In order to obligation and it to be accepted. The second?
Obligation and it's being and the reward.
Obligation and rewarded. And then the third? That's an obligation. So, going back to the first, then this is referring to the conditions of an Islam wal-aql. The Islam, the person is a condition that the person is Muslim. And likewise, it's a condition that the person is aqil. And so, مثلا, لا يصح الحج من كافر أو مجنون ولا مجنون. So we cannot now say that the Hajj is accepted from the kafir or the majnoon. So we have the condition that in order for it to be accepted. Now, and these two fall into that. The Muslim and the aqil. We do have the discussion as well, and we've mentioned it in a few other Masail, pertaining to if the Hajj or if the kafir is mukallaf. Now, so if the kafir is responsible for his actions in terms of, is it a case of, it's an obligation upon him to pray even though he's a kafir, my friend. or it's an obligation for Hajj, you know, it's a kafir. Or it's an obligation for him to fast, you know, he's a kafir. Naam. You remember this discussion? Naam. What did we mention? What did we discuss? What did we go through? For those that remember.
It's obligated upon them.
It's obligatory upon them? That was the...
Being punished in the
Look, that's the answer. You should have woken up. Naam. That's what I... And what else is also used? ما سلككم في السقر. نعم. What has caused you to enter the fire? And it was a khitab, it was an address to the kuffar. Now, what has caused you to enter the fire? And what did they mention in response? That we went from those that established the prayer. Now, the response wasn't that we entered the fire solely because we were kuffar. We entered the fire because we did not establish the prayer. And so what we understand from that is that the kafir is obligated to perform the actions of the same obligations that are upon us as Muslims. However, if they do perform these actions whilst they're still kuffar, they're not accepted. Naam. So this is the first obligation, and that is accepted. The second is that the condition, in order for it to be obligation and as well as that rewarded. And there are two individuals entered into this. That is the baligh and the hur. The baligh and the hur. The individual that's baligh and the individual that is free. So the Misha the person is free. And so it's not from the shurut al-sihha. So we cannot now say, for example, the sabi, the child, if he performs Hajj, that his Hajj is not accepted. So the Hajj is performed the rites of Hajj. So it's not from the shurut al-sihha. However, it's from the shurut when it comes to it being rewardable. What we understand from that is that, if a person performs Hajj whilst they are still a child, they are still obligated to perform Hajj after puberty. Why? Because it's from the conditions. And so it cannot now be said that they attain the reward of the Hajj just as a person that is baligh does retain the reward. Likewise as well, the abd, the slave. If the slave was to perform Hajj, whilst the slave, then if he is ever freed, at that point he's still obligated to perform Hajj of Islam. He's obligated to perform the Hajj of his Islam. And so, however, if the slave was to perform the Hajj, then we will not now say that Hajj is not accepted. Does it make sense? So, then we have the third, which is the condition in relation to the wujub faqat, the obligation. The obligation alone. And this is in relation to istita'ah, ability. This is in relation to ability. That if the person has an ability, then it becomes an obligation upon him to perform Hajj. If the person has the ability, then it becomes an obligation for him to perform the Hajj. And there's a discussion about whether that obligation is al-fawr or al-taraqi. Al-fawr meaning that as soon as they have the ability, they must perform the Hajj. Or al-taraqi meaning as soon as if they get that ability, that they are able to delay the Hajj for whatever reason. Does that make sense? For most apparent is that it is ala fawr. That a person, as soon as they get the ability, they must perform the Hajj. And it's something as well that we should always reflect upon in terms of the Hajj of our Islam. Because people will say that the Hajj is too expensive and X, Y, Z. But, along about it, they may have the wealth and they put their wealth into other things. Someone's not even realizing. So they put their wealth into other things, not even realizing that if they put that money aside, they were able to perform the Hajj of their Islam. but maybe due to this distraction, the dunya, whatever the case may be, they end up putting their money into things that are going to essentially distract them and take them away from performing their Hajj. And so, when a person has that ability, they should hasten towards it. An example of that as well is the fact that the Prophet ﷺ, at the earliest opportunity, he performed the Hajj. So even though it was made an obligation in the 9th year, and some argue that because it was made an obligation in the 9th year, but how he did not perform the Hajj until after that, that this allows for the person to say that they can perform Hajj, al-Taraqi, they can delay it. However, what is understood is that the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, he delayed the performance of the Hajj for a maslahah, as we mentioned earlier. That the mushrikeen were still present. And so, in order to remove the mushrikeen and their practices, not just the mushrikeen, their presence, but their practices on Hajj. What was known from the practice of the mushrikeen in Hajj? Anyone know? They performed tawaf naked. So in order to remove those the mushrikeen and their practices in Hajj, now, then it took some time. Even after the Fath of Makkah. And so, what we understand from that is that the person must perform it as soon as they are able to do so. And what we understand from istita'a as well, the ability, is that the person has the ability by way of his wealth. There's the ability by way of his wealth. He has the ability by way of the rahila, by way of the vehicle that will take him there. Likewise as well, he has security within his own self and his family. So he possesses security within his own self and his own family. Now, what we understand from the first, the wealth is clear. You have the wealth and you're able to pay that wealth. You're able to pay for the Hajj and everything that entails. The rahila, again, if a person has the vehicle that can take them, generally now they have airplanes, and the Amr is yasir, the Amr is easy. And even if it was a case that they didn't, then of course if a person still was able to travel upon a riding beast that was able to take them from their abode to Hajj, then they have the ability. Now, along with that as well, is that they have security. Meaning that they have security in their own self, meaning that the path that they take in order to perform the Hajj is one of safety. The path they take in order to perform Hajj is one of safety. So, for example, if you were to say that the individual, in order for him to perform a Hajj, he has to go through war zones, then you wouldn't say that this is a path of safety. And thus, you wouldn't say that he has an istita'a. An example of that is that even though he did it, was a man that he made Hajj from his home in Bosnia. And he walked from Bosnia to Mecca. This was only like 10 to 15 years ago. This was within the last 10 to 15 years. Within that journey though, he has to go through Syria. Go through Syria. And of course, the hal of Syria is ma'roof. And so, the reality is, if that was his only path to go to Hajj, then he would have the udhr, he had the excuse to not perform it. Because he doesn't have that path which is secure. Likewise as well, what is mentioned in terms of security is the security of your family. Meaning that in your absence, if a person was to go on Hajj, in your absence your family are in safety. And that your absence does not cause hardship or cause a threat to the safety of your family. Is that clear? So when it comes to security, security for your own self and security for those that you're leaving behind. And so both of them have to be in place. Now, and then also when it comes to the dayn, if a person has a debt, then a person should not perform the Hajj until they've paid that debt, until they've been able to pay that debt. Thereafter, Qudāmah mentions, ويعتبر المرأة وجود محرمها وهو زوجها ومن تحرم عليه على تعبيد بالنسب أو سبب مباح. نعم. And so thereafter as well, it mentions the ishtirat, the condition for the woman. So we have these conditions. We have the condition of Islam, we have the condition of the aql, we have the condition of the person being free, we have the condition of the person being valid, we have the condition of the person having ability. That's general. Now for men and women. Then you have the additional condition, which is the condition of the wujud or the mahram, that the mahram is present. This is the additional condition. Now, and this is based on a narration where the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, he mentions لا يحل لامرأة تؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر أن تسافر إلا ومعها ذو المحرم. حديث متفق عليه. That is not permissible for the woman that believes in Allah and the last day to travel except that she has a mahram with her. Except that she has a mahram with her. And so we understand from this is general. Naam. This is the general affair of the Hajj. However, or general affair of traveling rather. However, with this as well, we understand that this can be attached to the Hajj as well. And that is from the conditions of the Hajj. And thereafter it mentions the maharim. It's going to be her husband or anyone that is related to her. Now anyone that is related to her. And so it's anyone that is related to her by way of nasab or by way of sabab. Nasab by way of lineage or sabab by way of another cause. Now, so the mahram by way of lineage would be who? Father, brother, uncle. Which one? Which side? The dad side. The mum side as well. Talking maharim. The mahram is both sides. Now, so father, brother, uncle, both sides. We said no. Grandfather. So basically, the father and going upwards. So father, grandfather, great grandfather. Would you? Naam. Likewise, going downwards. Sons, grandsons. Naam. And then we have as we mentioned, the uncles. So this is all nasab. Who else as well? The father-in-law. That's not nasab though, because you're not related. nephews as well. Naam. So, by way of a sabab, by way of another cause, then who would be the mahram by way of another reason? Not by way of lineage. Naam. So by way of through marriage. So who becomes the mahram by way of marriage? The husband, of course. No.
His father.
The husband's father, now.
Milk siblings.
The milk siblings, now, you can say by way, not necessarily marriage, but by way of a reason. That's not lineage. The stepfather, now, so the mother's husband.
Is it grandfather?
The imam if she don't have a mahram.
Children, your daughter, husband, son-in-law.
The son-in-law. Yeah. Now, if you said that
The imam if she don't have a
the imam doesn't have a mahram. Ahmed's not having it. Now, why not?
Because
He's still an ajna. No, still ajna. So not in terms of the wilaya, then yes. So if the woman doesn't have another guardian, then yes. But in terms of the mahram, in terms of the one that can be in khalwa with her, in terms of in seclusion with her, or to travel with her, then this wouldn't be the case. Now, so it's anyone that is attached to her through marriage. So also as well, I don't believe we mentioned it, but also the husband's sons. Now, the husband's sons. So it's possible a woman marries a man and he has sons already, and these become the maharim as well. So each and every one of these are the individuals that the woman is able to travel with, and they are regarded as being the mahram. This is in opposition to what you find some individuals do now, some women do now, where they will go on Hajj or Umrah for that fact with large groups, and then they will say that the group leader or the group itself is my mahram. And this is not legislated. This is not legislated. And so rather, if a woman was to go on Hajj in such a manner, it could be argued that this is something that affects the sihha of her Hajj. Allah Ta'ala knows best, because she has not fulfilled some of the shurut. Wallahu a'lam. And likewise as well, as you mentioned, this is not a manner that has been legislated. So this is not something where a woman can say that because she's going to perform the Hajj in such a way. Wallahu Ta'ala a'lam. Thereafter, Ibn Qudāmah, he goes on to mention, فَمَنْ فَرَّةَ حَتَّى مَاتْ أُخْرِجَ عَنْهُ مِنْ مَالِهِ حِجَّةً وَعُمْرَةً. And so, if the person is negligent in terms of performing the Hajj, until the extent that they pass away, then the wealth is taken, something from their wealth is taken in order for it to be fulfilled, rather, for the Hajj and the Umrah. In order for it to be fulfilled for the Hajj and the Umrah. What do we understand by way of that, though, Ikhwan? That the wealth is taken. Is it just taken and just that, let's say for example, Sabili Mithal, that Hajj is £6,000. Is it just taken and just given to the Hajj group £6,000? That is given to, that money is used in order for someone to perform it on their behalf. So the money, it's not just a case of the money. The Hajj still needs to be performed. However, the Hajj needs to be performed on their behalf by another individual. Upon what condition? That? The intent to do it, and they've done it previously as well. That the person that's doing it on another person's behalf, they've done it previously before. As is mentioned in the hadith, where the companion mentions that they are performing the Hajj and Shubrumah. The companion mentioned that he's performing the Hajj and Shubrumah, a relative of themselves. And then when it was asked, has he performed Hajj for himself, and he replies in the negative, then the Prophet ﷺ commanded him to perform Hajj for himself first, then after that perform the Hajj for Shubrumah. Naam. And so, what we understand from that is that first and foremost, if a person has not performed the Hajj, Hajj is deemed to be to some degree like a debt that needs to be performed. So when going all the way back to now, we were discussing the janaiz. Naam, we were discussing the janaiz, and we were discussing the wealth of the deceased. We said that there were 5 things that are done with the wealth of the deceased. Sorry, do you remember what they were? The 5. So someone passes away. There's 5 things to do with their wealth.
The will,
So the first thing is the
the burial,
funeral costs.
the will,
Something before that.
the debts,
The debts.
the prospective debts or the upcoming debts.
Now, the perceived debts, the expected debts, essentially. Now, the wasiyah, so the anything going up to a third of a person's wealth. Now, which is the wasiyah is for who?
All of them the inheritance.
All of
All of the inheritance.
all of the inheritors.
All of them.
Everyone other than inheritors. Anyone that will not inherit. Anyone that's not individuals that are not due to inherit. Now, then the inheritors. So if we're talking about the wealth of the individual now for their Hajj, which of the 5 would it fall into? The very?
Debts. Debts, the second one.
The second one, the debts, or possibly the third, you could say. Now, so it would fall into the debts of the individual that this needs to be performed on their behalf. If the individual fell short in that regard, and they did not perform it, and thereafter, Ibn Qudāmah goes on to mention, وَلَا يَصِحُّ مِنْ كَافِرٍ وَلَا مَجْنُونٍ. And so it is not accepted from the kafir nor the majnoon, as we mentioned. So the Hajj of the kafir is not accepted nor the majnoon. ويصح من صبي والعبد. And it's accepted from the sabi and for the abd. Now, so it's accepted for the child and for the slave. However, they are not rewarded for it. Now, it's not a rewardable Hajj. Meaning that the Hajj would still need to be performed at the change of circumstance. Change of circumstance meaning they grow up and become adults, or they become freed, in this case of the slave. Naam. And thereafter he goes on to mention ويصح من غير مستطيع والمرأة بغير محرم ومن حج عن غيره ولم يكن حج عن نفسه أو عن نذره وقع حجه عن فرج نفسه دون غيره. And so Ibn Qudāmah goes on to mention that it is accepted from the one that is not able to do it. Meaning, that he doesn't have the ability to do it, but he just does it anyway. Mathalan, say for example, the person has no money, but he takes debts, he takes out loans to perform Hajj. Naam. So of course he's not from those that have the ability. If anything, now he's put himself in the red to perform Hajj. He's put himself in debt to perform Hajj. We do not now say that this individual's Hajj is not accepted. Naam. Naam, we do not say the person's Hajj is not accepted. And also, Ibn Qudāmah mentions here at this point in relation to the mar'ah, the woman, that she performs the Hajj without the mahram, then the Hajj is accepted. Now, there's a discussion around whether it's accepted or not. However, but what's apparent is that it is accepted because there's nothing to indicate that she has broken a condition or broken something that would negate the Hajj itself. However, she's fallen into haram by way of that. And it's possible that a person may fall into haram but still perform the Hajj and still have a Hajj which is correct. An example of that, and it's a common example, is where individuals, they perform the Hajj without what is known as the Sharīʿah. The Sharīʿah is the permit to perform Hajj. And if you perform it from a country or from anywhere outside of Saudi, you're given it anyway, as soon as you go with your group. The group is given the Sharīʿah. As for if you're going from Saudi, then you have to apply for it generally yourself. And then you apply for it through the groups that are there. But what is common and what you find may occur is that the people will perform the Hajj without the Sharīʿah. Now, some Ahlul Ilm, they mention that performing Hajj like this is haram. Why? Now, it's مخالفة ولي الأمر. So it's mukhalafa, you've opposed and you've disobeyed the ruler. Now you've disobeyed the ruler. The ruler has set this particular rule, and you set that rule in terms of the cap on the number for the masalih of the Hujjaj as well, for their benefit. And so when that is set, and if a person opposes that, then he has opposed the command of the ruler. Now, however, it is not now said that this is something which will negate the Hajj. Now, this is something that will negate their Hajj and negate their Hajj being accepted. Allah Ta'ala knows best. Thereafter, Ibn Qudāmah, he mentions, and whoever performs the Hajj for other than themselves, however, they have not performed the Hajj for themselves already. Now, or they perform the Hajj and it's a Hajj where they vow to perform it, or it's a Hajj that they're performing believing it's nothing, that is a voluntary Hajj. However, they haven't performed the Hajj of Islam. Then the Hajj becomes the Hajj of Islam, or the Hajj becomes their own Hajj. Now, so for example, an individual says, I'm going to perform Hajj for my brother. My brother is deceased, I'm going to perform Hajj for my brother. However, he hasn't performed Hajj for himself. The Hajj that he performed, irrespective of what he intended to do in the first place, the Hajj that he's performed, all of those manasik it becomes his Hajj, and the Hajj of his Islam. Likewise, for whatever reason, if the person was to say that I'm going to perform this Hajj, and this Hajj is going to be a voluntary Hajj, and I'm going to perform my Hajj of Islam afterwards, for whatever reason. Now, sounds strange, but it could occur. Now, and the person says, I'm going to perform the Hajj of my Islam afterwards. Because they haven't performed the Hajj of Islam, this becomes the Hajj of their Islam. Now, this becomes the Hajj of their Islam. And these are the main points, and Allah Ta'ala knows best in relation to the beginning of what we want to discuss in relation to Hajj and its rulings. And the final thing we want to mention as well, just like many other of the ibadat that we've discussed and their ahkam, that the one that does not perform Hajj and he negates his obligation, then this is kufr. Now, I'm the one that negates the obligation of the Hajj. This is kufr. Why? Because it's takdeeb, it's denial of that which is found within the texts, the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah tabarak wa ta'ala knows best, and we'll conclude with that. Bismillah ta'ala, jazakumullah khaira, wa barakallahu feekum, wa sallallahu wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi.
Ustad, how can the Hajj be correct for the one who doesn't have the ability and the woman who
it's a condition in terms of wujub. We say condition in terms of if it's present, then it now becomes an obligation. Hence why there's differences in terms of conditions of whether it's sihha or wujub. That makes sense. That's why we mentioned the three different types of conditions here. So it's a condition. It's conditional, meaning that as soon as that's fulfilled, then it now becomes an obligation. So, for example, now, as soon as the person finds themselves with the ability, so let's say, for example, the person's path to Hajj was one which is now let's go for a war-torn country. However, the war ends, and he had everything else anyway, but now the war's ended, and now he can go through that path. Now, then he has to perform the Hajj. So that condition is now fulfilled. Now it becomes an obligation. Right? If now, for example, he went through anyway, as we mentioned the example of the man, the pilgrim that walked from Bosnia to Mecca. Now he went through anyway. His Hajj is still accepted. His Hajj will still be correct. Allah Ta'ala, in the case of the specific, of course not, we don't know. But in relation to any, generally speaking, the Hajj will be correct. So in terms of the Hajj being correct, then this is one thing. Now, in terms of it being, if you like, it's activating it, becoming an obligation, that's what is meant by that condition. No.
You mentioned about the child, if he was to perform it,
Yeah.
he will still not be rewarded.
No.
Would the parents be rewarded for it?
Not necessarily rewarded for the Hajj, but rewarded for everything that's entailed within it. You could say that possibly the parents will attain reward by way of husn tarbiyah and the actions that are found within taking the child to Hajj or taking the child to Mecca, and what is a good manner of cultivating the child. All these things are, inshallah, with good intention, inshallah, something that is found with reward. Allah Ta'ala.
What's that? You know the wealth of the deceased. So the order you gave, is it in that order the wealth would go? Like, for
Yes.
example, if it just suffices the funeral cost, then the money will go all to the funeral cost.
Yes.
And then if it goes, okay, makes sense.
Yes, so it's all in that order, because it's an order of priority. So the priority before everything else that the person is buried. So that's the first thing that is dealt with. Likewise as well, what is left with him are debts. So that has to be paid before anything else. Then, if he's by the way, he has right to his wealth, a degree of right to his wealth. So he can say, I want this to be done with my wealth. So that needs to be dealt with first as well. Before finally, anyone that he's left behind that can take from his estate, essentially. So it's in order of priority. No.
Based on that, you mentioned the relatives that performs the Hajj for someone else.
Yes.
His Hajj will become first if he hasn't performed it.
Yes.
Say if a relative passed away and now they use that money,
Yeah.
but it wasn't his money that he
Yeah, he used his relative's money to perform the Hajj, yeah.
but he hasn't performed it before.
No.
So does that mean now like
He's going to need to find that money to perform Hajj on.
no, the person that passed away, he uses money.
No, I mean, that's what I mean. He's now performed. He's used that money
No.
and essentially used it in error,
Okay.
because he's used someone else's money to perform his own Hajj. So I mean, he's going to have to find that money again to perform the Hajj on behalf of that relative. No. Allah Ta'ala, please.
Well, it considers a dulm if he didn't knew.
If he knew, of course it would. You've taken someone's wealth and used it out like due right. It's not his wealth. The whole point is that you're using his wealth to perform the Hajj for him. This is his wealth. It's his wealth. So yes, definitely. So then some knowledge, definitely.
Just to clarify for the child,
No.
they will be rewarded, but it won't be counted as Hajj.
No, so in terms of when they say rewarded, then they're referring to the fact that they will have to do it again as an adult. No.
Just a role, but not as
As
Hajj.
Hajj, yeah, exactly.
Ustad, you know, the one that does Umrah in Ramadan,
No.
does he get the reward of Hajj? Does that mean there's different levels to Hajj then?
No. How do you mean?
Is it mentioned about the one that does
Sahih.
Umrah in Ramadan?
Yeah.
So, like that Hajj, it's like, you know, when we went Umrah, I think one of the teachers mentioned, like, you know, if you stay in the masjid till Sunnah after Fajr,
Yeah.
you get the reward of Umrah.
Umrah,
That's
yeah.
like different levels of Umrah or something like that.
Allah was best. But in terms of Hajj, that's the if what's so apparent in the narration, it's the reward of Hajj.
Okay.
And so that's it's azim in of it. So
Okay.
no.
Ustad, is it mentioned why the slaves Hajj is not counted as a Hajj for them?
Essentially because Hajj itself is ibadah of your body and your wealth. Is a form of ibadah which you exert your body and you exert your wealth. The slave doesn't have any wealth. So it's like saying, for example, the slave give a sadaqah. It's impossible. Because he doesn't have any wealth. Or the slave gives zakah because he doesn't have any wealth of his own. Anything that he has of wealth is owned by his owner, basically. So that's why. So if someone was to pay on his behalf to go on Hajj, that's why that it wouldn't now say that this is the person he's performed the Hajj and it's the same as the Hajj of the free individual because he hasn't used his own wealth to perform that. No.
But if you're free and someone funded your Hajj, that's still fine.
No, it's someone funded it and that's fine because you fulfill that condition. No.
Do you know the narrations that I mentioned about a certain action bringing the reward of Hajj? Is
Yes.
that the same in that you still have to do it, you just get the reward?
Yeah, you still have to perform the Hajj, but you get the reward of it, the reward found within it. But you still have to perform the Hajj. The Hajj is there. No.
If somebody comes to have a certain amount of money, which one would be obligatory upon them first? Would it be Hajj or would it be Hijrah from Darul Kufr? Would it be Hajj because it's the pillar or?
The Hajj. Allah is best. Someone asked Shaykh. Hajj is the obligation. The Hajj is the obligation. Not said Umrah is not Hijrah is not obligation, but the Hajj is from the pillars of your Islam that you need to fulfill, and so a person needs to do that. And from the benefits of Hajj and Umrah is that it's a means of increasing your wealth. So a person should not look at it as this or that. They should look at it like I need to fulfill the pillars of my Islam, and then this inshallah will aid me with this endeavor, i.e. Hijrah.
And just similar to what the brother mentioned, if somebody passes away and they have debts, I think you mentioned Hajj falls under the second category.
Yeah.
Or if they've got debts to people and they've got that debt to Allah, obviously to perform the Hajj, would it be the Hajj that takes precedence over?
What's apparent is the debts that you have to pay to the people.
To the people first?
Yes. So you pay the debts to the people first, and then whatever's left. If you don't have anything left after that, then it cannot now be said that you have the ability to perform it. Because we're talking about the one, and there'd be farrata fi. Yeah, the individual that was negligent in regards to performing the Hajj. So what is the negligent is the one that had the ability but didn't perform it and then died.
For the women that are not married yet, have a mahram,
Yes.
is it the case that these men have to make it a goal to try and help her fulfill this Hijrah,
Hajj.
Hajj, or is it okay for them to rely on for to get married?
Get married.
And sorry, the second question is also, if it is the case that it's upon them, is there an order of who needs to fulfill it first, or who's got
From those that you're. But what's apparent, and Allah Ta'ala knows best, is that as soon as the person has the ability to take that person I take, let's say for example, his daughter, Hajj, then he should make it a priority to take them and not rely upon someone else. I find a new mahram, i.e. the husband. Now, as for if it's ordinal, or if it's ordinal, then I'm not aware of any specific order where it's a case of you take this one first or that one after. Just whoever you're responsible for and you're mahram for, then the person should make steps towards taking them if he has the ability to do so.
What's the ruling on someone who died and he had the ability to perform Hajj, but he didn't do it out of negligence, and he has passed away now? What's the ruling on that individual? Is he a sinful Muslim?
You could regard as being blameworthy and sinful because it's obligatory and Allah Ta'ala is blessed to perform the Hajj as soon as he has the ability to do so. So if he doesn't do that, then he's blameworthy. It's not even let's put aside the fact if he dies on it. Let's just say he gets the ability and he doesn't perform it and he delays it. Then even in that scenario, you can say that the person is blameworthy for that, right? If he dies, then even it's the same scenario. Why? Because now he hasn't performed it, and the responsibility is left to others. But it can be said that he was blameworthy before that anyway, before the point of his death. His death is just a circumstance now that means that the obligation or the responsibility has transferred to another individual. But in terms of it being blameworthy, then that could have been before the point of his death. That makes sense.
So, you know them groups that are taking sisters that without a mahram, are they sinful for that then?
They can be sinful in terms of if they're knowingly doing it, if they're claiming that this is correct and it's upon mahram. This is now misinformation, if you like, about the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a lie upon the deen of Allah. And this whole scenario is one that is blameworthy, and Allah knows best. Now,
And the last question, so you know the people that are performing Hajj on behalf of the person, like, do they get paid for doing the action? Like, in terms, like, you add $2,000 on top of, and they get paid for actually doing the action?
oh, they shouldn't. No, someone should not take an ujrah for it.
Okay,
They shouldn't take any form of like payment or renting out their services, if you like, to perform Hajj. What they can take is whatever they need for the Hajj. So let's say, for example, they need food or whatever else for the Hajj. They can take that. They can take amount for that specific purpose. But they can't say that I'm going to take this and I'm going to charge you this amount. This is something that is Ustādh became quite common amongst some of the Tulab of the Jamia, where they would say they do the Hajj their first year, and then the years after that they'll rent out their Hajj services, and they'll say, they'll charge whatever amount. Yeah, Allah Ustādh. No, what you can charge is just a particular, whatever costs you the Hajj, and whatever you need to sustain yourself during the Hajj as well, in terms of food, even clothing, whatever is your needs at that time within those days.
I think there's brothers out there willing to do that, yeah?
Willing, it's more than willing. They go around asking, do you know anyone that needs to do the Hajj? Yeah, more than willing. Yeah, Allah Ustādh.
You know, if the individual earned money from haramis but they left it behind, you still perform Hajj on their behalf.
If an individual
earned the money from haramis and they deceased,
and
you still perform Hajj on that money that they earned.
all the money is haram. All the money is haram. And Allah knows best. Then would say that this is the money can't be used for anything. It's not useful, if that makes sense. It's like saying, usually when the person asks a question about the haram money, I use the example of robbing the bank, because it's so clear. That person robbed the bank, they took the money. You wouldn't now say you can use that money to do anything with it, because it's clearly not your money. Nah. So when it's haram, means you shouldn't look at it as your wealth. because you haven't earned that wealth in a manner which is upright and correct. So it's the same as mentioned. The person goes into the bank, robs the bank, takes the money. That money doesn't belong to him, and so you can't start now say that even if he passes away after that, that with that wealth we're going to do this and this on his behalf, because it's not his money. If that makes sense. So if it's clearly haram money, then there's nothing that can be done to benefit with it. And in these scenarios where we have haram wealth, the only thing that it can be used for, if it cannot, obviously it needs to be returned. If it can be returned, if it cannot be returned, then the only thing it can be used for is what is referred to as the services, right? So in the Muslim lands, it will go to a fund that builds, for example, builds roads or things that are seen as lower things, renovation of toilets, things like that. In terms of in the non-Muslim lands, then you can give it to the masajid, and then the masajid can use it to buy cleaning products for toilets or to build toilets even as well. So things of those lowly matters. But that's the only thing that can be done with that wealth if it cannot be returned. No. Allah knows best.
And they won't be rewarded for it, right?
No, it's not rewarded for it. You're not rewarded for it. So you can't say, I'm going to give my money to the masjid so you can buy some cleaning products, Mr. Muscle and all of that, and then say that I expect a reward. No.
And part of the reward of completing Hajj is obviously the sins being wiped out, right? Could you say now that, obviously, as the brother mentioned, if we, for example, after Salat al-Fajr, sit down and do the dhikr and you get the reward of Hajj?
Of Umrah. Oh, you mean, so if you do Hajj in Ramadan? Yes.
Do you get that reward also, or is that specific just for the actual act of Hajj?
Allah Ta'ala knows best. But from what's apparent, it would be only with Hajj. But then any reward that's attached to Hajj, then you get that for the action of Umrah. But in terms of the sins being forgiven, then this is attached specifically to Hajj, and Allah knows best. And the Hajj Mabrur, the righteous and accepted Hajj. And when the Messenger of Allah mentions that there's no reward for it except for Jannah. Then this is referring to the Hajj and performing the manasik of Hajj. Allah Ta'ala knows best.
With regards to the istita'a for a woman, is it with her wealth or is it with her husband's wealth?
So it's it will be with her husband's wealth. With the husband's wealth. If she has wealth of her own and she chooses to use that for Hajj, for that as well. But primarily it's the husband's wealth. Because it's not expected that she's going to have wealth of her own. No, Allah Ta'ala knows best.
But even if she got like 20 grand in the bank and the husband miskin,
he's to up his game, isn't it?
So based on that, would there not be now, she would be more prioritized than he's more, for example?
I had the Mashaykh speaking.
So say it again?
Well, I think I've seen a video of the Mashaykh speaking about that, saying the mother gets priority, I think.
Okay, no. But
Or like you taking you or your mother.
the earlier question, I think she was asking about who gets priority. No. Oh. No, جزاكم الله خير. بارك الله فيكم. صلى الله وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.